first, let's talk about the scientific process in general. If you go back to elementary school or middle school, we all did experiments, right? We had an idea, we got super excited, we tested it, then we looked at the data. Essentially, we still have that same process today. It's obviously much more advanced and we use some fancy tools, but it's still the same principles and all the same logic still applies. What we do here is we kind of think of an idea. We think about either a clinical question from like the medicine side of things, or maybe a laboratory idea or question we have. We draw up a design and an experiment, what we're going to do. We test it and we look at the data. It's really as simple as that. Then once you have information, you're supposed to publish your data into peer-reviewed journals. Peer-reviewed means essentially people who are familiar with your field and knowledge, they kind of look at your study before publishing it to identify any huge issues. There's lots and lots of issues with peer review and with academic publishing, and that's a whole nother podcast that maybe we can talk about one day. There's lots of issues, but theoretically, it's our way of kind of helping prevent anything from getting out there. It means that, hey, someone's gone through the process, the scientific process of understanding, having a question, designing an experiment, and running the experiment. And so it's kind of helped this safeguard to make sure that just not anything gets in the academic literature. But that's essentially what it is. It's kind of like a safeguard there. And so ideally, when we do this, we kind of hold our ideas loosely, meaning, hey, I'm not quite sure what's going to happen. We'll see what the data shows me, and then we'll kind of change our opinion based on that. Unfortunately, today that isn't the case all the time. Obviously, there's tons and tons of amazing scientists out there doing incredible research and have just changing the world with what they do. But a lot of times we're having a lot of issues. We have people who kind of hold on to ideas, they're essentially building experiments, trying to prove their own point of view. Instead of running an experiment and seeing what it shows, like true science is, these people, like I said, are building experiments, trying to prove their point of view. And that's not science, that's manipulation. And that's a huge issue that we, need to look out for in the scientific literature is that, if your whole career is built on one specific thing or one idea and you need to prove it, then that's a huge conflict of interest. So ideally what we want to do is kind of go at things with an open mind, saying, hey, let's see what the data shows, and then kind of let us drive, where we go from there. And so I think that's one big issue. And then I want to dive a little bit deeper into some issues we see with our culture and why it's so challenging sometimes to talk about science and the culture. And so here we're going to talk about a couple of things. The biggest thing I see in the culture isn't necessarily bad research, but rather a lack of nuance. And what I mean by that is in today's world, black and white does not get clicks. It's as simple as that. If you just scroll through YouTube or anywhere, people are trying to get your attention. They're saying, don't do this, or this is going to make you die, or this is going to kill you. And so it's like fear and black and white. That's the easiest way to get people's attention. Our attention spans are shorter than ever, it appears like. So nuanced takes aren't exactly interesting. And sometimes they're a lot more time consuming. Like I said, if someone can just get an answer to something right away and feel like they got an answer, as opposed to hearing a 10, 15 minute back and forth, understanding the nuances of it, it's a lot easier just to consume that super black and white piece of content and move on with your life. And so that's super challenging for us to kind of, how do we communicate science in a nuanced way, but that's also easy to digest. It's very challenging. Like I said, it's just so much easier to say something's black and white, get some attention, and then odds are no one's going to fact check you anyways. Obviously, you want to have people in your corner who are looking after you and making sure you're posting the right things. But at the end of the day, if you post something, the vast majority of people are going to look at that and say, interesting, and scroll to the next thing. And they're going to think that, I saw this, it's from someone who's maybe reputable, that has to be true. And once again, that's why it's interesting, at least in the scientific literature, that we should theoretically have people checking that to make sure that, hey, you can't just put something egregiously terrible in here and they're going to call you out on that. But like I said, that can happen all the time today in our pop culture, and pop science is kind of, as we call it. People can post whatever they want, and then, it's there and it's taken as fact. And additionally, it seems we've lost our ability for civil discourse on complex ideas, and we only really want clean and neat ideas. Like I said, it's really tricky, but there's a huge benefit from having differing opinions and then being able to kind of talk about it, have civil discourse about that, and understand, well, I don't agree with you here and this is why, and I don't agree with you here and this is why. But today it just seems we have this huge divide where, people's ideology is essentially their religion, where it's like, I can't be wrong in this. And that's a really challenging thing to do. So unfortunately, though, science is not neat and clean. Usually it's really muddy. And in fact, science is always changing. And so when scientific bodies change their recommendations, that's actually a good thing. That means that they're changing their opinion based on new information. What we don't want is someone who's stagnant and just says, I'm going to do this forever, and anything that doesn't fit into what I want isn't good science. That's not good science. We want to have an opinion, and we can have strong convictions. They can be loosely held though. So essentially, I have these strong convictions, but they're loosely held, meaning I feel like this is right. I think this is right based on what I see in literature, but you can convince me another way to learn something new if the data shows something separate. And that's what we really want to go for. But however, that can look super bad to the public, like we saw in COVID with things changing left and right. That's science. Science is, hey, this is what we think. And we're going to talk about like the different levels of evidence and why this might happen. But science is saying, hey, this is what I think is going on. And as we learn data and new information, we're going to go over here and say, actually, this is going on. And it looks like we're, quote unquote, flip-flopping ideas. But really, that's just kind of going where the science is pointing us. And that's actually good science. The next social issue that I see is essentially the death of expertise and the rise of a platform for everybody. Now, overall, I think the hierarchical nature of medicine in the past has definitely left a lot of people without answers and people have felt left out. So overall, the empowering of people with online platforms is, I think, a very good thing. I learn from so many different people in so many different fields. So this is not me saying that we can't learn from others who aren't quote unquote experts in a specific field. That's not the case at all. That being said, I definitely think there is something for formal training, and expertise can't just be replaced on the internet. You can't replace residency, doing 3 to 7 years of residency for a medical doctor. You can't replace getting your PhD, spending all of those years in the lab or doing research. You can't replace clinical experience working with patients. You can't replace working with clients in the gym. None of that can be replaced. Theory and book knowledge, they're also obviously critically important for this. But the implementation of what we do from the book to the actual, area of expertise that we're working in, that's more important than anything. And so it just goes to show also, though, that someone doesn't have to have credentials, to make them correct either. Obviously we see it all the time online that people, have these credentials and they're incorrect. And in fact, I guarantee you there are plenty of things that I'm misinformed about. Guarantee it. I hope that you call me out on it. If you see it, send me a message, let me know. That'd be great. But it's really challenging because we have people who are supposed to be trusted, we can't trust. Well, people who we shouldn't trust are trusting. So it's like, you're so confused saying, like, if I can't trust anybody, what do? Well, here's one thing to start off. Find multiple sources. I say, if you feel like you can't trust anybody, find multiple sources. If someone is saying something way out of left field, like essentially you're hearing this and you're like, well, this is the first time I've heard this. This is way out of there. I don't get it. Talk and research with the people around you and people you trust to see if you're missing something. Maybe it is something new. Maybe it's something new and groundbreaking and we're onto something, or it's something that's completely fringe and not supported by any evidence. I think also it's really, really helpful to listen to differing viewpoints. Don't get sucked down an algorithm that they're going to feed you exactly what you want to hear. It's known, it's tried and true. We know that if you live on social media, it's an echo chamber and it's just going to kind of continue to find things that, not only incite fear and, controversy and all that stuff, but they're going to kind of give you the positions that you are tunnel into already. And it kind of just goes down and down this rabbit hole. And so it's really important to seek out opposing views on things. We can listen to them, see if you're wrong. I mean, that's at the end of the day, that's a good thing. If you listen and say, I don't necessarily agree with that, then that's okay too. But having that different viewpoint is really helpful. So essentially, I'd love for you to be able to prove to yourself why you hold the stance that you do. And obviously, this is super challenging for me as well. I think I do it all the time in medicine. We've learned lots and lots of things, the way we used to do it. And then people ask me, or my learners will ask me, well, why do we do this? I have to sit there and think, oh shoot, like, why do I do it this way? It's the way I've done it, but it's super humbling to get called out and say, hey, why you do the way you do. So prove to yourself why you hold the stance you do.